Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Wednesday, May 28th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Texas game in 94 days, the game against Michigan in 185 days. If you're planning your next event, make it unforgettable with Grateful Griddle, Columbus's favorite food truck, serving up smash burgers, gourmet sandwiches, and good vibes. Book your catering today at gratefulgriddleoh.com. Before we get to the main topic of today's show, a little bit of basketball news. Just want to let you know about Buckeyes just announced a home-and-home series with Notre Dame. They will host Notre Dame this year, November 16th, and then they will go to South Bend next year on December 12th. So a very interesting home-and-home series with Notre Dame. Those two teams have not played a whole heck of a lot. Notre Dame has not beaten Ohio State since 1973. They only have one win over the Buckeyes in basketball since the 1930s, which is one more than they have in football. All right, on with football now. And this is a show I just thought about this as just a topic not very long before we hit record on this one. I had a different show in mind, and then I thought, you know what, let's talk about this instead. And let's talk about it with our buddy Tony Gerdeman of BuckeyeHuddle.com. Tony, I have spent basically from the day after the national championship game, maybe even the post-game show of the national championship game, saying, look, enjoy this. Do not expect another national championship this upcoming season. Like, you gotta, this is not something that happens every year. So I've sort of set that as the sort of table stakes here. Now I want to kind of go through why I think of all the Ryan Day seasons, this one actually ranks relatively high in terms of the likelihood that they could potentially win another national championship. So before I dive into just sort of the initial ranking of where I think the previous season stand, and then we can figure out where this season falls in there. Give me your broad assessment before we dive into this. Is it a scale of 0 to 10 likelihood of Ohio State repeating as national champions? 10 is put the mortgage on it. 0 is congratulations, you're ULM or Vanderbilt or someone like that with no chance to win national.
That's an interesting question because it becomes a more difficult percentage when you throw in last year's national championship. But since this is its own thing, and I know, Tom, you're trying to talk about repeats and defending, and there's no defending a national championship. It's a different team. I wish you'd just move on from last year already. But no, I would say, like most years, don't you go in thinking it's like at least a 5 or a 6? Like there's a 50% chance is awfully high, though. So I would say, but if you only say like 25, that's like a 2 or a 3, then that's close to ULM. That's one away from ULM then, Tom, if you say it's a 2 or a 3. So I think, I'll say a 4, but really 4 is pretty high.
Well, I think we probably need to redefine the scale maybe in terms of the likelihood in a general season, that 10 is like, boy, this is the best chance they're ever going to have, and 0 is, okay, boy, this is definitely not going to be the year. Let's define it that way instead.
So like 1998 would have been like a 9 or a 10, where you're like, this is the best team in the nation. I would say, I think it's fair to say 6 or 7, with the understanding and the assumption that the quarterback is going to work out. And I think that's the fairish assumption under Ryan Day. But I think you could say a 6 or a 7, and then it becomes kind of like the win totals. Like, who's higher? Is there anybody higher? I don't know. There might be other 6s and 7s though.
Yeah, I think there's a couple different things we'll go into this, and we'll get into it in a minute. But one of the things that really changes the number for me is the fact that you got 12 teams getting in right now. Because if you go back through basically since Urban Meyer got to Columbus, any year that Ohio State was eligible to be in the college football postseason, they would have been in a 12-team playoff. So that's, the fact that you now are in and your chances are higher than 0% on December 1st. Well, that probably means you're going to have a better chance to win overall. So that bumps it up a little bit for me. But let's just run through just the Ryan Day era. And I was making this list, and it's like, boy, they could have won the national championship in any of these years. But I think if you look through the list of years, and it's going to be a little out of order for what I think many people might think. But the top one, 2024, they were pretty clearly, from the beginning of the season to the end of the season, one of the most talented teams in the nation, if not the most talented team in the nation. You knew they were going to get into the playoff almost certainly, even with a couple losses. So you didn't have the one weird game that blows up your season and you're out. So that I'd put at the top of the list. Second, I'd have 2022, just because, again, very, very talented team. You had the first year of Jim Knowles' defense where it was like, okay, now they have two sides of the ball. That's good. You had the CJ Stroud offense. They were scoring a ton of points. Yeah, the defense was not in 2024 shape yet, but you saw how close they were to beating Georgia, and then you saw what Georgia did to TCU. So I think that's a pretty clear number two to me. Third one is, I think, where people might go, huh? But third for me is 2023. And the whole point of this one is there was no great team that year. Ohio State was on the road, played the ultimate national champions on the road. And as flawed as Ohio State was, they were driving for the potential winning score in the final minute in Michigan territory. You look through the rest of that playoff field, and it's a bunch of, fine. There's not a team in that field that is clearly better than Ohio State to me. And if Ohio State just finishes that drive in Ann Arbor, they're going to win that Big Ten championship. I don't remember which of the interchangeable bad Big Ten West teams Michigan beat that year. If that was a Purdue year, was that Iowa? Okay, it was. Yeah, I think that might have been a middling Iowa team instead of a middling Purdue team. But either way, that's a very winnable game. And then you have to beat Alabama in the Rose Bowl, which that Alabama team was good, but was not incredible. That was not a vintage Nick Saban team. And then you have to beat Washington, who again was good, but not incredible. Certainly not a complete team by any means. So I have 2023 there. After that, I have 2019, which I'm sure this is one that people would probably have higher up. This 2019 is not a year when you can say there were no other great teams. There were no elite teams that year. No, 2019, there were three teams that probably would have won the national championship in virtually any season. 2019, Ohio State would have had to beat two other teams that would have been good enough to win the national championship in most other seasons, Clemson and LSU in the playoffs. That was an incredible Ohio State team, but that playoff path is pretty difficult. Then after that, I'm going 2020, the discrepancy in the COVID rules and Alabama having no positive COVID tests all year. It's the darndest thing. And Ohio State constantly missing players and having different practice rules and all sorts of stuff. That was a year when they were kind of rolling the boulder uphill. Plus, that was an incredible Alabama team. So you've got those two things working against you. And then the least likely to me was 2021. And again, that's a team that was from Ohio State, one win away from winning the Big Ten and going to the college football playoff. But you had a really good Alabama team and a great, probably the single best Georgia team that year. So I'll say you probably, between those two, that's probably the least likely of the previous 6 years. Are there any in there that you want to really push back on me?
No. So thanks for having me. The 2021, just defensively, that was not a great season for the Buckeyes. And you feel like they would have just had to have been perfect on offense. Even the Rose Bowl against Utah, like they were incredible and had to hang on, and had to come back from 14 points or 13 points, whatever it was, to win that one. But you see, like at the end of the season, a lot of these teams are doing pretty well. Like even the loss to Georgia, where it's like that still looked like one of the two best teams in the nation. The Buckeyes did that year, but I don't really have any big quarrels with you. And the reasoning with 2023 is correct because Washington, like there's not a lot of great teams that year. So you figure if you just get into the mix, you can do some damage. And I'm just looking at the AP polls and the CFP polls for all of those years. Their AP high was 2 in each of those years, save for last year when they won it all, and their AP high was 1. CFP high was interestingly 1 or 2 every year, except for 2020 it was 3 when they made the national championship game. But this has always been under Ryan Day a consistent championship contender, and to be out of the running in those 4-team playoff years, it would have been interesting to see. Like the 2019 season, you said it exactly correct. Clemson, LSU, Ohio State would have, I don't know, they may have been 3 of the best teams in the last decade. Like they may be the favorites in maybe most of these years, save for a Georgia or an Alabama here or there. And so that one, yes, it may have been their best team, but the road was more difficult. So that's just a lot of me saying, Tom, I begrudgingly, and I don't do this often, and I should just start as spewing expletives right now, so we can't air this. But I agree with you.
Wow, we've been doing podcasts for, I don't know, 3,000 episodes or so. It finally happened. Do you believe in miracles? Yes. All right. So now the real question here, and the topic of the show is, where does 2025 fit in with this list? 2024, obviously, that's going to be clearly number one. That's going to stay number one. 2022, I think you have some similarities. It's probably a little bit, the 2022 team feels like a little bit more of a sure thing because you had a second-year CJ Stroud at quarterback. You did have a first-year defensive coordinator, so some similarities there. But you had more guys back on defense. I think you had more returning starters that year. You're losing a lot of guys on this year's team, and you have a lot of, especially on the defensive side of the ball, Matt Patricia's not quite starting from scratch, and there is some elite talent on both sides of the ball. You imagine going back to 2022 and telling yourself, yeah, Marvin Harrison's good, but wait till you see what's coming next. And you never would have believed it, but here we are. So, all right. So 2024, 2022, I think are both clearly more likely years for Ohio State to have won the national championship. But man, I don't think I see anything else there. I think I'd put them ahead of 2023 where, again, I think some of the stuff you had going for you in 2023, where there's not a clear cut, this is the elite number one best team in the nation, no questions asked. I think this is a similar year. And yeah, you've got probably a more challenging schedule this year with Texas on the non-conference schedule and Penn State and Michigan in conference. And, we've run through all of that stuff before. But you also now have more of a margin for error where that 2023 team, they would have made the college football playoff even with that loss up in Ann Arbor. So I think in terms of all of Ryan Day's teams, as much as I've kind of been saying, well, listen, don't expect a national championship this year. They certainly are going to have, they're certainly going to be able to throw their hat in the ring and say, if not us, then who?
Yeah, and we're going to start seeing a bunch of preseason rankings come out. CBS has Ohio State number one in their post-spring top 25. But I also think the schedule is the most difficult that they've had in this stretch of time that we're talking about. This is a schedule that if they lose their toss-up games, is going to keep them out of the playoffs. And you're talking Texas, which is going to be, I think, last I saw is that Ohio State's favored by 3, so it's basically a toss-up. At Washington, we've talked about. At Illinois, we've gone through this. At Wisconsin, Penn State at home, at Michigan. These are all games that you can't overlook. And so I do think I do expect Ohio State to make the playoffs, but I also think this schedule is going to test them and certainly make them earn it, maybe more than last year's schedule did.
Yeah, and I look at this, and this feels like a 10-2 to me, where you're not going to lose all your toss-ups. And boy, if they beat Texas week 1, that feels almost like you'd really have to screw something up to not be in with a win over Texas and presumably a 10-2 record. Like you might even sneak in at 9-3, maybe, but we'll see. There's a lot to be determined about how the committee is going to rank teams this year, because it didn't work out great the way they did it last year. So we'll see if the criteria or the selection process changes at all this year. But all right, good. Appreciate the sanity check there. There's a lot of factors that go into this. Schedule probably working against them to a certain degree, but the 12-team playoff certainly working in their favor. And if you are a young team, as this year's team is, or at least an inexperienced team, you would certainly expect to be playing your best football towards the end of the season. So if they can get in, like I said, why not them? So we will see how they do this season. We will be there for all those games, starting with Texas and ending wherever the heck the Ohio State season ends this year. Could end in a lot of different places. Wherever it is, we will be there. Tony, Kevin, and I covering the team for Buckeye Huddle. Got Mark and Berm covering recruiting. Got a whole team of X's and O's gurus as well, all to make you a smarter football fan. That is all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. If you have not signed up, What are you waiting for? Just $4.99 for your first month. We are headed into camp season and official visit season. It is going to be a crazy and exciting month of recruiting. We're going to have the incredible dynamic duo. Go ahead and trademark that, Tony. No one has ever used that before. The dynamic duo of Mark and Berm covering it all for you at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.